The Scarrett-Bennett Center and the area surrounding it were completely unaffected by the flood. So we're going to continue with the Dreamland Festival. It's going to be as much fun as ever, and it is absolutely on. Sign-ups stopped dead as soon as the flood occurred, of course. But I'm just reassuring you now, if you thought you might like to go, you can still sign up. Do come to the Dreamland Festival in Nashville, June 25th through June the 27th. It's going to be a wonderful time. Now, those of you who follow Whitley's Journal know that I have just posted a journal entry called Out of Body, Out of Time. It's turned out to be the most read item in the history of UnknownCountry.com. It's about a completely clean out-of-body movement that I had on the night of Mother's Day, on midnight Sunday night. Also, for subscribers, I've talked about it a little more. There was a very interesting sequel on Monday night, and so for you subscribers, there is a discussion of what it meant to me and also what happened and the insights that it has given me into the question of soul and body. Don't miss this either. It is well worth your time to give it a listen. It's about 20 minutes of discussion about an experience that's really very rare in this world, but interestingly enough, is possible. I mean, it's happened to me exactly twice in 25 years, but it's possible. Okay, now we're going to go on to Ann Strieber and her marvelous interview with one of the most interesting men in the world, Russell Targ.
Russell is more than just a remote viewer. I want to start off the show, Russell. Well, welcome, by the way. Nice to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Ann. I'm very happy to be with you this morning.
Well, I want to start off with a quote. What was seen as correct in one generation is realized as incorrect in the next generation. Within every generation, there's a huge blind spot. When you look back at slavery, you cannot help wondering how it is possible that this horror could have occurred. And it occurred with the acceptance of good people. We have to be willing to see what is occurring in our own lives, just as horrible as slavery that we have been blind to. And you know, Russell, I think on this show and on this website, for us, that would be the existence of aliens, visitors, extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them, because many of the people we chat with regularly, who subscribe to our website, who I have interviewed personally, have had these experiences, and they are totally denied, but they won't always be. What do you think about that?
Yes, indeed. Well, a nice quote was from my teacher, Gangaji.
Yes.
Who's an American spiritual teacher in the Advaita tradition. She's a very powerful, loving, transmitting teacher that I've been sitting with for about 15 years. She's very astute, full of wise things to say that are scattered throughout my memoir.
Yes, and you know, when it comes to sitting and meditating, when we're through with this, I'm going to get by email your snail mail address and have you send and have a copy of The Path sent to you. This is Whitley's book on everything he learned about meditation from the Gurdjieff work he's done. And I don't think you need it, but I think you'll like it.
Always happy to learn something new.
Well, it was a tarot formation that came into his mind all of a sudden, and he developed it into a meditation technique, and I think you'll find it interesting. You know, Russell and I share something, and it's something rather odd. What it is we both share the fact that we both have a problem with face blindness. Now, Russell, you were born legally blind, am I right?
That's correct.
Well, you know, I wrote about this in a couple of diaries that these listeners will be familiar with. One of them called Fearlessness, and the other is called Faces and Mazes. And it's a very odd thing to be. You know someone, you know who they are, but you don't recognize them. it's like the Rolodex of images that most people carry around in their brains is gone or never existed in your case.
It's all about the Buddhist idea of the self. As people think that I am so beautiful and so special, how could you possibly not remember what my special face looks like?
Oh.
And it's the idea that if you think that who you are is what you see in the mirror in the morning, then you're in for a lot of suffering. Because there's much more to us than what we see in the mirror. And that's what I've been trying to teach. I've been trying to give people a feeling and an experience that who they are is this non-local awareness, the awareness to move their consciousness out into space and time and experience the bigger picture rather than feeling they're limited to their physical body.
And you were able to move people's awareness out to space and time with remote viewing and with out-of-body experiences, which Whitley had spontaneously, and then he went to the Monroe Institute to hone his technique. And that many people who write to us have. It's a common occurrence among people who have visitor experiences. I'm not sure why. Maybe they're more attuned to a certain part. Maybe a certain part of their brain is turned on more or something.
Well, since writing my memoirs, I've had a lot of invitation to teach remote viewing in various interesting places.
Uh-huh.
I was in Cancun last month at the Prophets Conference and visiting the pyramids. We had a big group there who were very attuned to learning to quiet their mind and describe and experience what's going on in distant places. So what I'm really doing is not teaching remote viewing so much as giving people permission to get in touch with the part of themselves that's psychic. I can basically stand in front of a group and tell them that I have an interesting object in a box on the stage and give them permission to quiet their minds and describe what I'm going to show them in a little while so they can have a mind-to-mind communication with me or look into their own awareness and describe what they're going to see in a little while. So the principal interesting thing that I know about remote viewing is it's no harder to describe an object in the far distance than it is to describe one that's on the box in front of you. Similarly, it's no harder to describe something you will see tomorrow than it is something you'll see in just a few minutes.
So in other words, you can time travel. You can time travel with remote viewing.
You can indeed. That's why we call it a non-local ability. So the idea of non-locality has gotten a great deal of acceptance in modern physics in recent years. Non-locality is no longer a metaphysical idea, but is widely accepted in physics, and the idea of non-locality is a good description for our psychic ability. Because the most important thing that we know is that our psychic abilities, remote viewing ability, is independent of space and time.
Well, you have some interesting statements about this in your book. You say, remote viewing is an ability we all have to a greater or lesser degree. We all have. I think that's interesting. That lets us describe and experience activities or events blocked from ordinary perception by distance or time. So we get out of our ordinary perception. Is that getting out of the left brain and into the right brain, or what do you think?
Well, it's getting out of conditioned awareness. That is, the society and the newspapers tell you what you're able to do, and we invite people to move from that conditioned awareness into what the Buddhists call spaciousness. And exactly as you say, you're moving from analysis and naming into the non-analytic part of your brain, which is experiencing. What's interesting, all the way back to the 8th century, a Buddhist teacher named Padmasambhava wrote a nice book called Self-Liberation Through Seeing with Naked Awareness. And naked awareness is a lot like remote viewing. And he said that this is our nature, and if you can give up your desire to name things, which you cannot do psychically, then you can move from your conditioned awareness into spaciousness, which he felt is a much healthier place to reside. And that's what I've been doing.
Well, we found that a psychologist once wanted to take a survey of all the people who wrote to us. I read about 500,000 letters from contactees and abductees after Whitley put our mail center address in communion and invited people to write. And a psychologist wanted to send these people a questionnaire, so we didn't give out the addresses. We had our secretary do the work. And we found one of the last questions he just put in there, kind of on a whim, was, were you sexually abused as a child? And he got a 10% positive response to that, which is statistically significant. And we had the theory that perhaps that sort of thing, that sort of experience, something that does happen but shouldn't happen, can't happen but it does happen, breaks the cosmic egg for these people. In other words, it enables them to see things like grays and visitors and other worlds that it changes their ability to perceive. And what do you think about that?
Well, I think that trauma certainly opens people up to different experiences, but in the remote viewing realm, it is not necessary to fall on your head or meet an alien or to have a traumatic experience. In the United States, psychic functioning is very repressed. That we still are affected by the burning of 1 million witches.
Yes.
Many of them in Salem, right here in the USA. So having psychic abilities is repressed. In the movies, for example, psychic abilities do show up, but the psychic always comes to a bad end. So in my teaching... Well,
that's changing a little. I mean, you've got Medium and things, new TV shows. It's changing a little, but go ahead.
It is changing a little. But in our work at SRI, we work with government scientists and researchers of all descriptions.
And military men. That's what interested me.
And military people.
You think if there's anybody left brain, it's a military guy, but go ahead.
And after 5-6 years of working for the government during the Cold War, Army Intelligence asked us to set up a training program for the intelligence community in Fort Meade. And we then trained 6 Army officers, including Joe McMoneagle, and those people did extremely well in our formal remote viewing tests, where you had to describe what it looked like where somebody was hiding in the San Francisco Bay Area. 4 of those people were independently significant and went on to be very successful remote viewers and remote viewing teachers.
They had the ability for some reason, some kind of innate ability.
That's right.
Interesting.
Now, we think that everybody has an innate ability, and it's just repressed.
Interesting.
So,
although psychic mediums say that they were born that way. But Russell, it's time to take a break. I want to leave this segment with a little story about my own face blindness, and we'll go on to another subject, but it's rather amusing. I think it'll amuse our listeners. We have supper about 4 times a year with the one and only famous movie star we know out here, and our listeners will probably guess who this is, but I'm not going to drop names. And the other day we had dinner with her, and I came out of the ladies' room first. Well, she made it first, and she was standing there, and I did not recognize her. And I usually cover this up, cover up this disability. And I said, well, you caught me, and I explained, And the funny thing was, I think it was an absolutely delightful experience for her because, of course, she's always ducking and hiding, and she has a very distinctive face. And she's trying not to be recognized, and here was somebody she knew who didn't recognize her, and I think she enjoyed it quite a lot. But we'll be right back.
You're listening to Whitley Strieber's Dreamland Online with guest host Ann Strieber.
Dreamland subscribers, live chat with Whitley and Ann Strieber will not be held next Wednesday night. We'll be back in a week.
We're back. I'm back with Russell Targ, talking about his wonderful book, Do You See What I See? I have not dropped the name of the book yet, so I'm going to say it's Do You See What I See? Memoirs of a Blind Biker. And it's, Russell, do you have a website?
I do have. My website is espresearch.com.
ESPresearch.com. We'll certainly put that on the show
and people
description.
can go to that site, see what I'm up to, and they can communicate with me, and I usually answer mail sent to me at my website, ESPresearch.com.
Well, I think you're going to get
And
quite
I'm
a few
happy-
questions
happy to
from
do that.
You're going to get quite a few questions from our listeners because they're an extraordinary group of people. I wanted to talk a little about the remote viewing jobs you've done, so to speak. I was rather shocked, by the way, to find out that this has been taken up by quite a few Scientologists. Now, out here in L.A., Scientology is kind of the it's owned by actors, and everybody else kind of disdains it, and they have a big, expensive castle-like building over in Hollywood and everything. So nobody quite knows what to think about it. But you say that really a lot of remote viewers went on to be Scientologists. I found this very odd.
It was really the other way. The Pat Price and Ingo Swann were Scientologists to begin with before they even met us.
Oh, I didn't know
I
didn't know that.
And they felt that their Scientology training helped them become a remote viewer.
Huh.
They had perfected remote viewing through the Scientology. Now, many meditative programs lead you into remote viewing, so it's definitely not necessary to be a Scientologist to be psychic. In fact, most of our remote viewers, of course, were not Scientologists.
Not a lot of them in the Army, no.
That's right. Pat Price was one of our first, and Ingo Swann. But after that, we had Keith Harari and Hella Hammett and Joe McMonagle, many other people learned to do remote viewing. Of course, the whole gang in the Army were not Scientologists. And many of the Army people went on to teach remote viewing. Our program was ended in 1995 at the end of the Cold War and the end of the Soviet Union, so our program became declassified, and many of the people in the Army program who are Army officers, like Paul Smith and Lynn Buchanan and Skip Atwater and others, began to teach remote viewing. So although during the Cold War remote viewing was secret and parts of it were top secret and limited access, if you go to Google and search on remote viewing in quotation marks, there's almost 1 million pages dealing with remote viewing.
Now you say the program was stopped, but here we have Osama bin Laden hiding out. We don't know if he's dead or alive, although I suspect viewers know the answer to that. We know where he is. I mean, we know he's in the mountains of Pakistan, and satellites even spot him when he comes out because he's very tall. Still, it seems like a crazy time when we're looking for terrorists and vetted terrorists, and we're discovering people like this popping out of the woodwork. Why would they disband this program now?
Well, it requires a courageous management to run it. We had a unique collection of people at the Defense Intelligence Agency and in Army Intelligence and in the CIA. You had a unique group of people who were confident in their own ability, and they were willing to take a chance. And Hannah and I were unique in that we already had scientific credentials. Hannah and I were known for our laser research.
This is Hal Puthoff.
Hal Puthoff,
who's somebody we know. Actually, I haven't seen him in quite a while, but we always have some meal with him when we go to Austin. Try to, anyway.
Well, my colleague Hal Puthoff and I were known as laser pioneers. So we could get a hearing in the DIA and Central Intelligence.
Because you weren't weirdos.
That's right. At least we didn't appear so. But so we were able to show our data even to NASA, and consequently we were able to get financial support from the government and scientific agencies that had supported our laser work at an earlier time. They knew how to give us money, and were aware that we wouldn't embarrass them and wouldn't squander our money. So to resume that program would either have to be a new collection of scientists come forward or some courageous people within the Army Intelligence to support it. Remote viewing is easy to do, but it requires a skillful collection of people to actually mount a program to find somebody. Now, Stephen Schwartz was very successful in describing the hiding place of Saddam Hussein.
Oh, that's fascinating. Tell about that. I was going to ask you about that.
Tikrit.
Yeah, he described it perfectly. Go ahead, tell me.
He did that. Schwartz organized that at a workshop that we were all at Virginia Beach, the Casey organization.
Yeah, we've spoken there, yeah.
Where he had quite a number of people who were targeted on where will Saddam Hussein be found, what will it look like. And people went on to, of course, identify the city of Tikrit, which was suspected, but the consensus was he would be found coming out of a hole in a courtyard to a U-shaped building, which is a kind of compound, and there was a river on one side and a highway on the other side. The building faced the highway, and they described him coming out with a long beard shape, and he would look like a homeless person.
Which he certainly
did. And that was all correct. So Schwartz published a drawing greatly resembling the sketches we saw subsequently. So Stephen Schwartz is an experienced remote viewing experimenter, organized this at a ARE meeting where people gave very, very accurate descriptions.
So it wasn't just him, it was the people in the audience, so to speak, who remote viewed the same. That's fascinating.
And he did it a couple of months before Saddam Hussein was found. So if somebody would organize a program or hire remote viewers, I'm sure that we could find him, but I don't think you don't have the courage in the government anymore to do that.
Yeah, they barely have the courage to pass health insurance. Listen, I want to talk to you too about the treasure hunt. You used remote viewing to find sunken treasure. Tell us about this from a ship.
Well, we made an effort to find it, but that was not one of our successful missions.
Oh, dear.
I worked with Alan Vaughan to locate treasure off the coast of Africa. He went out with the investors in a small boat and a side-scan sonar and was able to locate, after dowsing on a map, a spot that looked like a treasure site. The investors then rented a large salvage ship, and we went down. We went back to the site, and there was nothing to be seen. It looked like the bottom had been scoured. So we don't know whether it was an error with the initial site,
or somebody else got there first,
or whether the captain went back and stole the treasure. But that was not one of our successful adventures. A successful one that was widely published was using remote viewing to forecast changes in the silver commodity market.
Oh, my, I remember that. I knew a bunch of filmmakers then, and they were going crazy because this was before digital was so popular. Film is partly made of silver, and they couldn't afford their film.
Well, when we were forecasting silver futures, Nova made a film that was widely shown in the U.S. We, working with a experienced remote viewer, we made 9 forecasts for changes in the silver market, 1 forecast each week. They were all correct, and we made $120,000.
So why aren't you all rich, just as rich? Why aren't you in Forbes' list of the richest people?
Because that's not necessary. In 10 years later, working with my co-author Jane Catra, who's a healer,
I want to talk to you about that later. Yeah, go ahead.
She and I were able to replicate that and forecast 11 out of 12 correctly in the silver market. So it shows that even a scientist can be psychic if the necessity level is high enough. So we were forecasting whether the market would be up a little, up a lot, down a little, or down a lot. BBC Horizon made a film. Nova made a film. We're on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So we had a lot of attention about that success, and we did indeed make real money. So one of the important things is that some people have the idea that God won't let you use your psychic abilities to enrich yourself. And that's definitely not true.
I don't think God is full of rules. I think all those rules you hear, all that dogma, that's people. I recognize it. Heaven, hell, it's people. Only people think that way. Well, it's about time to take a little break, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Whitley Strieber's Dreamland with expert host Ann Strieber.
Hi, we're back with Russell Targ. Russell, you mentioned God in the last segment, and you state in this book that remote viewing has given you the information that the soul exists, and you talk about asking for a message from God and receiving one. Tell us about that.
Well, in my experience, I'm still a fairly unreconstructed scientist, so I really don't know what a soul is. But I've had instances lately that make me very convinced that some aspect of spirit exists after people die. There are two now pretty well-known experiments, and I had something to do with both of those. One involves two psychologists in Germany who are interested in demonstrating that a spirit medium could demonstrate an ability to do something rather than just get information. Because researchers are always concerned that if you go to a medium and she says, yes, your mother is still there, she wishes you well, she's happy where she is, well, that kind of information is not so useful.
Yeah.
So what they wanted to do is, these researchers were both chess players, so they had the idea, if their favorite elderly medium in Germany could psychically contact a deceased grandmaster chess player,
fabulous,
somebody who had died, then they could arrange for the deceased chess player to play with a living chess player. So you can have a kind of extreme example of postal chess, except this would be post-mortem chess.
That's fabulous.
Where the dead guy would play with the living guy.
And the psychic medium would relay the moves that she was hearing from the dead person. Yeah,
so
go ahead.
the medium was able to locate a Hungarian player, Geza Méricsi, who died in 1950, who was the second strongest player in the world. And they were in contact with Viktor Korchnoi, a living chess player, who is the second strongest player in the world. Now, the medium was not a chess player, so this was a quite a laborious thing that went on over a year.
Although maybe that was a good control, though. But go ahead.
That's right. So the deceased guy, Geza Méricsi, played against Viktor Korchnoi. They played 60 moves. Eventually, the living player won because the dead guy had not kept up with his chess in the intervening years since he died.
I got rusty. Wonderful.
But it was a very hotly contested game, and in the middle, the deceased fellow dominated, playing the same kind of very complex game that he was famous for. In the end, Korchnoi won, and I was then able to send the complete set of chess moves to my brother-in-law, Bobby Fischer, the world chess champion.
That's a great brother-in-law to have. Yeah, you mentioned that. Go ahead.
So I was able to send the score to Bobby, and he said, indeed, this was played at grandmaster level. This could not have been faked or played by a machine, because Korchnoi is a well-known grandmaster, and Méricsi played at the same ultra-high level beyond what any machines could have done in the 1990s.
He also might have recognized some of his moves, his signature moves.
Yes, indeed. That is, Vernon Knapp, who's a master chess player and a psychiatrist, published a long article commenting on this experiment, that it was really played at a very high level. And while Méricsi was talking to the medium, he also had all sorts of amusing comments about his earlier life, funny things that had happened, and for example, he had never beaten the great Cuban player Raul Capablanca, who was one of the strongest players in the world, except one time. Méricsi tells a story that nobody knew at the time, that he was playing Capablanca in a world championship match, and Capablanca was there with his girlfriend, And in the middle of the match, his wife, Madame Capablanca, walked in, and Capablanca, the chess player, blundered, allowing Meretsi to win at the sight of his wife unnerving him, and he made a mistake. So it's a cute little story. Nobody knew what had happened, why Capablanca blundered, and the deceased Meretsi was able to reveal this whole interesting story.
Oh, fabulous.
So we have all sorts of side stories. From my point of view, and Vernon Knapp, also the researcher, psychiatrist, is a very compelling example that some aspect of the personality does survive because there's very strong circumstantial evidence that some aspect of Meretsi's personality survived for a half a century after he had died.
Well, Whitley often sees ghosts, and he, when somebody dies, we just wait around for him to see them, and this happened recently with a friend of ours. But he always has had the impression that they don't know they're dead yet, and sometimes he says, hey, you're dead, go away. But, he sends them on their way the best he can, and also people have seen greys, a certain type of alien called greys, take off and put on bodies as if they realize, whoever they are, that the body is just a machine that we're wearing around, something that most Westerners, anyway, are very afraid about. We put all our research money towards medicine because we think that when we lose the body, it's over. But, just think how much technology we could have accumulated with all those dollars if we knew the body was a machine and we were just wearing it.
Well, I have not had experience with aliens myself or in our work, but I'm certainly interested in the idea that human beings have capabilities beyond what we expect. For example, in ancient times, when we first came out of Africa as Homo sapiens, we had bodies which were strong enough to get food and take care of ourselves and fight off the animals. And then our brains developed so that we could understand the world around us. And now we're developing consciousness that can transcend space and time.
Like remote viewing,
feeling,
yeah.
And as people are concerned about 2012, I think it's time to upgrade the software for species transformation. That as a species, we have an opportunity to discover who we really are, to get in touch with a part of ourselves that's psychic, and take advantage of our ability to experience all of space-time. See, an experienced psychic is able to answer any question that has an answer. Now, you can't know everything because your little brain is finite, but any question that has an answer can be revealed and answered by a psychic.
Listen, a psychic I know read my whole life just by holding onto my wrist for a few seconds for about 4 pulse beats. I noticed... I
believe that.
Oh, no, I experienced it.
I'm running around teaching remote viewing in an effort to encourage people to think about the species transformation, because that's available to us.
Well, I wanted to tell you a little story. After I got out of the hospital, which all the listeners know about, I got a lot of interesting messages from what might be called God. And I know you're quite active Buddhist, and so one of these messages turned me towards Buddhism. And it was very interesting. I was walking along, and I got this message in my head, and it was, you have everything you need. And I had become, since getting out of the hospital, I've become much less interested in things. I mean, things just don't interest me much anymore, accumulating things, buying things. I mean, I like things as well as the next person, but it's just not a big interest for me. And I find myself kind of getting more Buddhist, but it's very interesting. I had a direct message from God because and it's in my diary for listeners, my diary called Dryer Sheets, because I remembered that I wanted a friend to bring me a box of dryer sheets because our local grocery store was shut down for a while. And I was mad because I said to myself, oh, darn, I forgot to ask her. Oh, darn. And I heard that voice in my head
You want to tell me what dryer sheets are?
Oh, they're something you put in the dryer to make the clothes soft. And if you did more laundry, you'd know what they are. But
right.
I heard that voice in my head again say, you have everything you need. And so next time I went to the closet to get out the laundry detergent, there was a brand new unopened box of dryer sheets sitting there, which had not been there
very
before.
Nice.
Yes, it was quite extraordinary.
Certainly the Buddhists teach that one of the big causes of suffering is so-called craving.
Yes.
Our desire to get things with the idea that if only we had that thing, then we would be happy.
Yeah, and I certainly could do without dryer sheets. You didn't even know what they were, but go ahead.
And the Buddhist teaching is that no thing will ever make you happy.
Yeah.
Happiness ensues from the way you live your life. For example, there was a time I was trying very hard to get a book published, my first book in this series called Miracles of Mind.
I think we interviewed you about that. I'm pretty sure we did.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Years ago.
And that book was very successful, but I had a terrible hard time finding a publisher for it.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, and my thought was, and I had talked to my little Course in Miracle group that I sit with, I thought, I would be happy if I could publish that book. That would really make me happy.
Yeah.
So finally, I got a deal, New World Library, published the book. It looked very nice, and I was then happy for several microseconds, and then I began to worry about, will they be able to publicize it? Will I be on the radio? How will I sell the book? What's the next thing?
Yeah.
That's right. So the idea that I will be happy if she will marry me. Then you get married and say, well, where are we going to live? Can I afford this? So if you think that some individual thing is going to make you happy, that's always a disappointment.
Well, I tell you what's going to make me happy is keep talking to you after this break, but we got to take a break right now. We'll be right back.
This is Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. We go deeper.
Russell, we're back, and I'm happy.
I'm glad to know that. Well, I can tell you something that will interest you.
Yes, tell me.
We had a program at Stanford Research Institute supported by NASA, and I developed a ESP teaching machine with the idea that astronauts could learn to quiet their mind and get in touch with the spacecraft so that they could tell if a problem was going to occur.
Oh, and my. Wonderful.
And the teaching machine was quite successful. That is, we had 150 people taking part in the program, and many of them learned to statistically significantly increase their ESP scores. So I have now written this game as a free application for the iPhone.
Wonderful.
So if you have an iPhone, you can download this game at no cost.
What's it called?
ESP Trainer.
ESP Trainer, and people can
find
out on your website. They can find
it. They can find it on my website, or they can go to the Apple Store, the application store, which is called iTunes, and download it at no cost.
Oh, this is fabulous!
And many thousands of people have downloaded this and are writing to me. Some of them are getting consistently very high scores, which is quite exciting. So if people are scoring 10 or 12 on this machine, it's a 4-choice random number generator that shows you a pretty picture and rings a bell if you get the right answer, so that you can keep track of how well you're doing.
This is marvelous. I mean, Whitley has a new iPhone, and
that's
he's
what it
always...
sounds like. So Whitley will do very well. I'd be very happy to know how he does with this.
Well,
so my game is called ESP Trainer.
Yes, I've written that down, and everybody's going to hear that. You're going to get a huge number of more downloads.
So I'm not selling it. It's my gift to the community. Because I don't want to. I'm not selling the teaching. I'm giving it away, and people like that because it allows them to get in touch with what it feels like when they're functioning psychically, and the important secret behind this game is that when you don't have that special feeling, you can just pass, and the game will show you the correct answer, but won't charge you for a trial. So you get 24 trials in a run, but if you don't have that special feeling, it allows you to pass and go on to the next one. So it does not require you to make a forced choice.
Well, you know, that special feeling is probably what some people would call intuition, and
Absolutely.
I know running a science website, we put up some stories about this, that scientists, I mean serious, mainstream academic scientists, not that these are the only good guys, but are making serious studies of intuition right now. And they say you should listen to it.
That's right. Yeah, we think intuition is made of two parts. Intuition is made of what you've learned in the past and have stored subconsciously. So there's a lot of information that comes bubbling up from time to time, which you can retrieve and help you make decisions. There's also another part which comes to you psychically, and very often you can't tell whether that good idea that comes to you, the idea for the new book or the new picture, you don't know whether it comes to you psychically, comes from inside or comes from outside. But intuition comprises both of those parts, the subconsciously stored material and what comes to you psychically. And in my workshops, I'm going to be teaching at the Omega Institute with Stephen Schwartz in August.
We've been there. It's a wonderful place. It's up in New York State.
That's right, in Rhinebeck. So Schwartz and I will be there for a week in August, teaching people remote viewing.
Oh, I wish I could come. Maybe we
will.
I've
done that many times. People have a good time. I've been doing weekend workshops, and they asked me to come for a week. So I thought that I would share that time with Schwartz, who's a good friend and researcher. So we'll just have a week-long ESP party at Omega.
It sounds fabulous, and it's a wonderful place. They used to have, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have a fabulous vegetarian restaurant there. I'm not a vegetarian, but it kind of makes you feel all kind of virtuous and everything. I want to, before we're done, I want to touch on something which is very interesting. Long distance, or maybe you just call it distance healing, because you were healed from cancer, and your late daughter healed people from AIDS with what might be called prayer. And, you know, I know that there are some scientific studies on prayer healing, but tell us something about this.
Well, the evidence for distant healing is very strong. My daughter was a psychiatrist, and she grew up in a household here where we expected her to be polite and intelligent and psychic as a child, and she managed to do all of those things. And as a Stanford physician, she became interested in psychic healing. The experiment she did that was very successful and influenced the National Institutes of Health, she had 60 of her medical patients with AIDS in San Francisco. So she had these 60 very ill men and divided them in two groups, 30 each. One group would receive distant healing from prayerful people around the country. The other 30 were the controls, and neither she nor the controls knew which group were receiving prayers.
Now, this was before all the new medicines for AIDS, too, I believe.
That's right. And this was in the late 1990s. Mm-hmm. So she worked with very experienced healers from around the country, energy healers, Reiki healers, Christian prayer healers, Barbara Brennan, energy healers, and all her people were experienced for at least a decade in doing healing. Because Elizabeth's idea was that if you continue to be a healer for a decade, it's probably working for you, rather than just working with so-called congregational prayer, where you ask everybody in the congregation to say a prayer for Mary Jo who's sick, but the people have no experience in how you would actually do that. So what Elizabeth found is that the people for whom prayers were said had much better outcomes. They had fewer opportunistic illnesses, fewer trips to the hospital, fewer days in the hospital, and much better self-report of their psychological condition. And all of these things were highly significant, and she published her finding in the Western Medical Journal. And this has been replicated in other laboratories, and the NIH is now very interested in supporting research in distant healing, because in her case, the 30 people for whom prayers were said had much better outcome than the controls. Now, nobody had AIDS cured.
Yeah.
But they had the side effects and the opportunistic illnesses did not appear, so they were in much better health. At the end of 12 weeks, during which time people had been praying for them or sending energy, the people in the prayer group were in much better health. So the message is that even if you don't believe in distant prayer and somebody offers to pray for you, you should accept their prayers.
You know, I want to tell you something that's very interesting. When I was in the hospital and, at death's door, they had those big machines in the hospital which record everything that's going on with your body. They have all these lines of squiggly marks. And Whitley would sit there, and he's an old Catholic. I mean, he's not a real serious Catholic, but that's what he was brought up as. And he would pray the rosary and pray and pray and pray, and he found that he was able to change those numbers and improve them. This happened several times.
And you had a good outcome. I'm very happy for you.
Yeah, well, I didn't tell you for that reason, but I just thought it was interesting that he was able to actually change what was going on with me with prayer. And that's a personal experience we had.
Mm-hmm. That's why I'm very happy to know that. You sound good.
Well, I am good.
You sound like you're doing fine.
Oh, I am. I'm doing great. In fact, I think I'm a little smarter than I was. But you were personally healed from cancer.
It's one of these things you never know. That is, in 1992, it appeared that I had cancer. I had X-rays and CAT scans and ultrasound, and it certainly appeared that I had a recurrence of cancer that I had an earlier time.
Yeah.
And I worked with a spiritual healer, Jane Cantra, and Jane said, don't even tell people you have cancer. That just marks on film. I will teach you to meditate and change your diet and change your clothes and reconnect with your friends and have a more spiritual path. And 10 weeks later, they had another scan, and all the frightening bad marks had gone away. And here I am, 2 decades later, I'm fatter and sassier than ever. I'm well. So what we don't know is whether a spiritual healer cured me from an illness or whether she saved my life by saving me from chemotherapy, which probably would have killed me because I was not of a strong constitution. So she definitely had a strong positive effect in my life, but we don't know exactly what that effect was.
Well, I wanted to say real quickly that I wonder if the reason we're having so much trouble with cancer, and we know it's partly environmental, we know it's partly genetic, but it's a mystery. I wonder if the reason is that it's not just that our bodies are in the wrong place, but that our psyches are in the wrong place, and we don't recognize that part of it. What do you think?
Oh, it's certainly a very stressful environment. That is, people are moving faster and families are coming apart. But my opinion is that it's environmental, that you have all sorts of things, all sorts of illnesses coming to the fore that used to be extremely obscure that are now becoming very, very common. So I'm sure that the terrible chemicals in the environment and in our food that are making us sick. The documentary Food Incorporated, I think, is an excellent, scary film that describes all the terrible stuff that appears in our food and how food is just a manufactured product rather than something nourishing coming from the garden.
Well, we put up stories about that on our website regularly. Well, our time is up. And here we are, two healed people who have had a great time talking to each other. At least I have.
Very happy to talk with you. And I invite people to take a look at my book, Do You See What I See?
Oh, it's a great book.
Memoirs of a Blind Biker. And the blind biker pertains to the fact that even though I'm legally blind, I've been driving a motorcycle.
I'm going to look out for you.
for 30 years.
I'm going to avoid it.
And you can do a lot. You can do a lot of things with your psychic abilities.
Well, I see a lot of motorcyclists out here in the commuter lane, where they're allowed to ride, who seem to be riding psychically. So I'm sure.
So I'm inviting people to communicate with me at my website, espresearch.com.
We will definitely put that on the show description so people can see it and click to it. And I think they definitely should. And Russell, I've had a great time. Thanks a lot.
Very happy to